Today I'm joined by Margo Selby. Margo's the owner and creative director at Margo Selby Limited. And that's a woven textile design studio that produces exceptional quality textiles for interiors. So welcome, Margo.
Good morning. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Margo. And look, thank you very much for joining us. And let's start off with, I always like to find out a little bit more about your business. So tell me a bit more about Margo Selby Limited.
So essentially, I'm a textile artist, a textile designer, and a textile producer. So I studied woven textiles as a degree at Chelsea College of Art. And then I went on and did an MA in woven textiles at the Royal College of Art. And quite soon after graduating, I started my own business. I was doing a bit of freelance work for mills, so designing uh, fabrics for people like Sanderson, for Missoni. So working for a mill to design fabrics that they could then sell to the different brands. Um, I started my own business, I think, just because I just had so many creative ideas that I wanted to, um, it was really lovely designing for other people, but I just had so many ideas that I wanted to do myself. And having my own business gave me the opportunity to really steer it in the creative direction I wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's understandable, particularly like the industry that you're in. And so if we go back, and actually, sorry, before I get into that, so it's textiles for interiors. So is that things like material for curtains, cushions, I don't know what, sofas, that type of thing? Have I understood that correctly, Margaret?
You've definitely touched upon some of the things that we
Okay.
do. In my studio, we create big installations for public art, so one-off, unique hand-woven textiles. We also work for people like Osborne and Little to create upholstery fabric, curtain fabric, and all the accessories. Then I also do a lot of licensing. So I've got a really lovely partnership with Habitat. I've been designing for Habitat for on and off for over 20 years. And so you can find my product through the Habitat channels, which is now on the high street in Sainsbury's.
Right. Okay. No, thank you for that's helped me now to sort of get a picture of the type of thing that you do. And by the way, I've had a look at your website and yeah, love the designs that you've got, and it has got a really unique style. So I love that as well. So anybody listening, watching this, yeah, go and check that out. So look, let's go back then to when you were younger, Margo, and was being a business owner something that you'd always wanted to do, or was it just a natural transition of that you went from, art college to becoming a business owner? Was it always something you wanted to do?
It wasn't actually a sort of specific plan. I think when I was at university and when I was doing my degree, I was always sort of quite anxious about where I was going to fit into the world. I always loved using very, very bold and bright colours, and I always loved being quite experimental with the materials that I used. And, some of my peers at university, they had really kind of sophisticated collections that you could really see going into, people like John Lewis, and you could see the commercial outcome of it. And I was sort of anxious that my things might not be everyone's cup of tea because they were quite bold. But what I found was by doing something which I loved, there was lots of other people that loved it too, and it actually set it apart. And so therefore I got quite a lot of attention once I did graduate, and then people wanted to work with me, and that sort of led on to setting up a business in order to work with the different people that had shown interest in what I was doing.
Thank you for that. And I think the key difference here for me as well, and I think in terms of when we're talking about a business, is that you have a business, you have employees, you have people that work for you. So it's not just that you're self-employed and you design things for other people. you have actually created a full-blown business around your passion and what you're good at.
It's been a very organic process. So it started off with people wanting to work with me as like a freelance designer. So would you like to do this design work for my company and create a collection for me? So I started doing things like that. And I was very much an opportunist, I suppose. So when I was working in a mill or a factory and I could see what they could do, I started thinking, oh, I could create some textiles off the back of this warp. And I started doing small bits of production on the back of projects that I was doing for other people, and that allowed me to start quite small. And then, yes, it's grown now. I think we've got, I don't know, 14 in the studio at the moment. So it has evolved quite organically. It's been a slow growth over the last 25 years.
Wow, and that's great. And look, and I'm sure there's been some ups and downs during that particular sort of journey. So what would you say has been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced being a business owner and taking your business through that journey over the last sort of 20 plus years?
I think there's one of the things that I think is quite different about what I do that has been challenging is that I work as an artist, an individual artist, creating one-off pieces, selling through galleries, um, as well as having a very, very commercial side. And um, when I started doing, I was weaving my artworks, and they're really, really important because actually they are the food for all of the commercial things which I do. The time I spend at my loom doing one-off hand woven pieces, that process and the things that I learn about color and the things that I learn about how to make a textile, I can then teach to a supplier or a factory to make something really original. And when I first started doing both, people would say to me, oh, no, you can't do both. You've got to have two separate websites. You've got to separate it. And that felt really scary to me. And also it would have made me feel a bit schizophrenic. So I decided actually, these two things are actually really supporting each other. The commercial aspect brings income, which allows me to have time to be creative and time to do my artworks. And then the artworks brings so much authenticity and fuel to the commercial stuff which I do. So I decided that I was just going to be really proud of doing both and talk about doing both. So my ethos is art into industry. And that's become like something which has made my business quite original. But it hasn't been an easy journey because they're two conflicting things sometimes. They both take quite a lot of energy.
Yeah, and I think, and the thing that really intrigued me when I was sort of doing some research, because I do research obviously before we have these discussions, is that not everybody is successful, particularly if they're creative and they've got an art, in actually turning that into a business. And actually, what really stood out to me is that you have done both. You've still got, as you explained there, the two sides of things, and actually you've created a commercial side of it that then supports the other side of it as well. So yeah, I was really impressed by it. And
I feel very grateful actually that I do really enjoy, relish, and throw myself into kind of the business side of things. I really enjoy marketing. I enjoy selling. I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy building partnerships. I like working with people. So it is sad that there are so many amazing artists and so many amazing creatives. And I've seen it a lot because I do quite a lot of mentoring myself as well. And you see that they give themselves so many blocks to their own success, or they just find it really hard to embrace that other side. But luckily, I really enjoy that side. I enjoy the marketing, I enjoy the communication. And it is essentially all down to communication. How do you communicate what you're doing visually, verbally, through partnership, through marketing?
couldn't agree more, actually. I think, communication is fundamental to everything, not just in business, but in life as
Yes.
well. I just feel that if we if the world communicated better, there'd be less issues and problems. But yeah, I won't go into all of that. But yeah, communication so important. And actually, I was going to ask you like how you've been successful in that, but then you've answered that in terms of because you enjoy it. You enjoy that side of things as well. That's enabled you to create both the commercial and the other sort of more personal side of things as well. So, if you know, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one challenge that you've got right now, what would it be?
I think this is going to be a really stereotypical answer, but I think it always for me comes down to cash flow. So cash flow is often a difficulty with many businesses, and I think as a creative, I've just got so many ideas and so many things that I want to do, but every new development, every new product costs money. So it always has to be slightly, it always has to be budgeted, thought through, and considered. And it would just be quite nice to have a cash cushion to sit on so that you didn't have to constantly be really analysing that cash flow. But I mean, I also do enjoy that side of it as well. I do have a very tight cash flow. I've got a tight budget. I enjoy crunching numbers, even, and I think, again, that's an essential part of having been able to have some success at what I do.
Yes, you're right. I mean, there's a lot. What you've described there are some of the fundamental things that makes a successful business.
But what I would say is that money has never driven me. So it's essential for me to look after the money in order to make sure that we stay afloat, that we support our staff, that we can all put food on the table. So it's essential to look after it, but it has never ever been what drives my decisions. My decisions or my driving force is always the creativity. And the more creative I am and the more I focus on those ideas, then the more the money just seems to come.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I see money as like an enabler. Money enables you to do certain things.
Yeah.
And those things that you want to do are personal to you. Some people want nice things, flash cars, nice houses, that sort of thing. But what you've described there is money is the enabler to enable you to do what you love. To be creative, and rather than the end result. The end result is to be able to do what you love, and money enables you to do that, rather than doing what you do creates the money. I like the way round.
An example in my business is that I used to feel really. I spent years weaving on my loom when I was a student. And when I started running my business and making textiles in factories and distributing textiles, I then felt extremely guilty every time I was sitting at a loom, because if I sat at a loom for a whole day weaving or developing, I'd think, oh God, I haven't actually, sold anything. I haven't marketed anything. I haven't spoken to anyone. And I'd start to feel like it was, a bad place to spend my time. But what I realised after time was that the more time I spent on the loom, the more interesting the ideas became and the more interesting the business was. And so by putting that hand making at the centre of my business and communicating that to the outside world, the more I found people engage with my business.
Yeah, and I think there comes that communication word again that you've mentioned there, is that yeah, so initially you sort of said, well, okay, yeah, it's sitting on on the loom being creative. But you're absolutely right. It's doing that in conjunction with communicating those things to your desired audience, whoever it is. Because this is one of the things that I often find with businesses. They're great at what they do. They're really talented. But if it's not communicated to the external world, nobody knows about it. So that it's those two things together and I really just want to highlight what you said there, because I thought it was really valuable. That it's actually you know, creating, designing, whatever it might be, that product, or in some businesses, the services, that's great. But then communicating that so people become aware of it. And it's,
And with that, it also comes kind of the narratives behind the designs, like there's always things that inspire me and or help to develop the patterns and the products. And what I've learned over the years is that by sharing those stories, sharing those narratives, again, it helps for people to understand and engage with the products. And
yeah, I think again another point, and and I'm sort of highlighting the things that you're sort of saying here, Margo. But yeah, um, people love stories. Whatever that may be, whatever industry or business you're in, people love to know the stories about behind the product, the service, or how you might have helped some other people, or how somebody's used your product or service. Telling that story is really, really important, and it's, yeah, I think that's great that you do that. So what's been your biggest learning since you've been in business over those 20 plus years, Margo?
well, I think, that there's things that I've touched on already, but there have been some key things that I've had to, really kind of confront and learn over the years. So, well, it was really critical realizing that being at the loom and weaving was valuable, and that I had to do that, and I had to build time in for that, and I had to put that at the center of everything. But also finances. Again, I've touched on it already. I've had to let, as when you're starting out and you're, learning, you might be when I started out, I might start getting panicky if there was a discrepancy around, £200 in a month. But as the business grows, those figures get bigger. And so now I've found it critical that I have to keep my eye on the money, because what might have been once a couple of £100 might now be £20,000 that could be short in a month. Or, I mean, luckily it doesn't come to that often, but I have to stay really, really closely in tune with the money. And so I've had to learn how to forecast, how to create budgets, how to use spreadsheets, all of those things I've sort of learned organically along the way. And what I've also found is really important is to surround myself with people who are really good at all the stuff that I might not be so good at. So making sure that everyone in my studio has all the skills that can support me with any areas that I might not have real strength on.
Yeah, no, again, it's great. I think there's a phrase that I love, which is always employ people that are better than you.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And they all are in my studio. They're all absolutely incredible.
I think that's a great thing, and I think also what you've sort of touched on there is that there's effectively always five areas in a business. Okay, the first one is about is generally what the owner or managing director does, which is a bit more about strategizing and leading and managing and all those sort of things. And then you've got four other areas, which are the one that you mentioned, operations. Okay, that's the designing, that's the being on the loop. But actually, we can't forget about the other three, which are finance, which you've quite rightly sort of said, yeah, look, some time has to be invested in finance. The other one you also touched on, sales and marketing. We have to invest some time in sales and marketing. And then the final one is HR, like as in looking after our team. If we've got employees, we have to invest time in looking after our employees and managing and leading our employees. So one of the challenges for business owners is actually how do they allocate time to all of those different areas? How how do you manage that, Margo? Because there's a lot
Well, the
there.
best thing I ever did, probably about 4 years ago, just after lockdown, um, I employed a manager. Um, and I have got an incredible manager. Um, she used to be a deputy head of a school in London. If you can be a deputy head of a school, you can do anything. The deputy head is actually the one that does all the work for the head teacher.
Yeah.
And she is so caring, and we already had a brilliant team, but she's created a real kind of family ethos within the studio. She really, really supports and cares for every single member of my staff on a daily basis in a way that is beyond what I would actually be able to do. She creates incredible morale, and I think everyone does feel genuinely looked after. She brings the best out of people. She grows people. She takes, young people that have come out of university and helps them to become really confident and strong in what they're doing. So, yeah, so I think you can't do everything on your own. I mean, when I was a much smaller business and I did have to do it on my own, I had to really carve out time every week to ensure that each thing got a little bit of love. But what's wonderful about growing your team and taking on staff is that you are able to delegate some of that out, and it allows the business to grow because it frees up more time to think about the strategy, to think about the new partnerships and projects and how those can grow.
Absolutely, look, great. Couldn't put it myself. I think that's absolutely right, Margo. And I think you've underlined that really, really well.
Very proud of my team. They're all absolutely brilliant.
That comes across as well in terms of how you're describing them and how you're talking about them. And I think that's really important. We should be proud of our teams. We should, if we find ourselves in a position where we're constantly moaning about our team, well, that's our fault because we recruited them. So yeah, it's
the amount of time you spend with them as well. It is like a family. I mean, that's not to say I'm really, really close with everyone, but you do spend a lot of time with them. And so it's really, really important to nurture those relationships.
I agree.
I mean, you have to be best friends. It's not about that. It's just about respect and, care and helping everyone to be the best people they can be.
Well, that's what being a leader is, isn't it? That's what you've just summed up there is what a leader is. So yeah, like it. And look, there's one question I like to ask everyone that's kind enough to sort of join me for this discussion, Margo, and that's this: what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you? If you could go back in time and give some advice to an 18-year-old you, what would you say?
I would say, there's so much advice, but I think just take everything slowly. I mean, I'm always kind of sort of rushing from one thing to the next project, and it's all very, very exciting, but it's really, really good to just sort of slow down, take things steadily, and record everything really nicely along the way. I've got this archive at the moment of what I've done over the last 25 years, and it's not as immaculately presented as I'd like it, let's say that. And I think if I'd have slowed down, I could have just taken a little bit more care about presenting and looking after the archive as I went along. So now I've got a huge job on my hands to kind of present it all so that it's saved and looked after.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Well, look, Margo, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.